So I've been thinking about this one all afternoon because it just cracks me up. But depending on what kind of day Brooklyn has, it could be good or it can be bad, or it can go bad at first and then good later on. But it's always when the teacher comes out with the kids and she goes, "Oh, I got to tell you a story." And I can't wait to hear what you got to say. So she comes out and the teacher says, "Oh, Brooklyn fired me today. She fired me about 4 times." And I said, "Oh, God." I said, "I got fired yesterday, so I can't wait to hear what she fired you for." So the teacher was out all last week, and she said, yeah, she said, when, came into the classroom, and she said, Miss J, you're fired today. Miss J goes, "Why am I fired?" She said, "Because you were out all last week." And she said, "There was all these different teachers in here." She said, "Oh, all I wanted was Mrs. J." So she said at first it broke her heart that she heard her say that. And Brooklyn has opened up and has cracked out of her shell a little bit. There's just some things, but she really, really, Brooklyn loves her teacher. She absolutely adores her teacher, loves her teacher, and her teacher loves her. She's an amazing person. But she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I had something I had to do and I wasn't going to be able to come in." And she goes, "It's okay. I'll forgive you this time and we'll rehire you. But," she said, "Mrs. J, you cannot be out again." Mrs. J's like, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry." So then it was time to get ready for lunch. And she, rang the bell and told the kids, "Okay, you got to start cleaning up your desks and putting your things away." But there's things about Brooklyn, when she doesn't want to do something, she just will go slow and lag, and it takes a lot, and it takes a lot of patience to get her to go. So Mrs. J says, "Brooklyn, you have to start cleaning up. It's time to go to lunch. You're holding everybody back. We got to go. Kids are hungry." She's like, "I need help cleaning up, Mrs. J." Mrs. J is like, "I'll help you a little bit, but you got to clean up the rest." She's like, "This is what you have to do. This is your responsibility." Brooklyn goes, "Mrs. J, can you please just help me all the way?" Mrs. J said, "I can't help you all the way, but I'm going to help you a little bit." She turns around, she stomps back, and she huffs and puffs, and she goes, "You know what, Mrs. J, I'm tired of this. You're fired." Mrs. J goes, "Oh, Brooklyn." She's like, I can't believe you're firing me today again. It's the second time in a row." So then the teacher helps her and she goes, "Okay, I'm sorry." And, she helps Brooklyn out. She said Brooklyn at that point did not acknowledge her, did not talk to her, did not, she just stayed silent. So then, Mrs. J, they go to lunch, they come back from, lunch and recess, and Mrs. J goes, "Am I rehired again? Are we friends again?" And Brooklyn goes, "I don't know. I have to think about it." So, her teacher goes, "Okay." She was like, "I apologize. I was just trying to, get you motivated." She goes, I just can't today, Mrs. J. I just can't." So her teacher was like, "Okay." So I let her go. I left her alone. Then it was time to take out books to do another, thing on, to do in class. And she just did not want to do it and wasn't, going to participate. And so she said, "Do you need me to call, one of the aides to come and, take you and just let you get some space and air from the classroom?" And Brooklyn said, "Yeah." And so she gets the aide to come and walk her around because it's part of her IEP. And she comes back and she said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. J." She's like, "I won't be mad at you anymore." Her teacher said, "Okay." She's like, "I understand." She's like, "I know we all have bad days." And so she goes, "Just so angry at you, Mrs. J." And Mrs. J goes, "Oh my God, she's like, it just started to break my heart even more." And she's like, to the point where she goes, "I can't, I didn't know what to say." And I said, "You can't let that get to you." I said, "She'll get over it, I promise." But, that's one of the emotions that Brooklyn will have, is she'll just have a moment, and the teacher knows. So then I guess the teacher pulled her aside and talked to her and gave the teacher a high five and said she was rehired again and that everything was okay. So then it was, I guess, story time. And I guess, some kid picked the book that they wanted the teacher to read today. So the teacher read it, and so then Brooklyn wanted her to read another book. And the teacher said, I'll read you this book in a little bit. So then Brooklyn said, okay. One thing about Brooklyn is she will remember, and she did not forget. And she, like an hour later, says, you promised me you were going to read me a book. And the teacher goes, what? And then she goes, yeah, you promised me you were going to read me a book. She goes, oh my God, I forgot. She's like, I'm sorry. She's like, I'll read it to you. She said, if I don't read it to you today, I'll read it to you tomorrow. She said, do I have to fire you again, Mrs. J? And her teacher goes, I guess I'll be fired again, because she said, you got to start your next assignment before the day is over. And she goes, I'm not happy with you, Mrs. J. I'm just not. She said, I can't believe you promised me you would read me. But so the teacher's like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I got sidetracked, and we were doing other things. And she's like, I just completely forgot. She's like, I remember, Mrs. J, and I won't forget this. And she's like, I just felt so guilty at, the fact that, like, I promised her something and I completely forgot, and I could have read it to her. And she's like, I just got sidetracked with other things. And I told her it's okay. Like, she'll be fine. She'll get over it. We get home, and I ask Brooklyn what happened, and she tells me, and I explain to her, like, you can't be mean to the teacher. She's just doing her job. And it just always worries me because, like, she knew her, Mrs. J, she knew her last year, because when Brooklyn would have her moments and meltdowns, she would need to walk, and Mrs. J would always have her classroom open, and Brooklyn's aide would walk her in there. So, like, she got to know Mrs. J last year, so it became a very close, thing for her. And the beginning of the school year, the teacher had a family emergency and was unable to start the beginning of the year, so the teacher ended up coming into the school year in January. So, she missed a good chunk of her teacher, which it sucked, and it was sad, and family comes first, and I completely understand, and I get that. But with, like, Brooklyn's behavior, she's going to be going into second grade next year, and I just worry so much about this happening, and, either the teacher not being able to, manage it, or if the students, make fun of her. I need to stop worrying until it happens, but I worry too much, and I do get anxiety from it, and I just wish that I knew a better way of reacting to things, thinking about things, calming her down. Like, we learn new things every day, and I do watch, videos, and I am part of, like, support groups and, like, autism groups on, like, Facebook and Instagram, but I hear a lot of those parents and a lot of the things that they describe, it happens in my household too, and I just, everything that they talk about, how they, like, try to resolve it or, fix the situation, when I try and do it with her, it may not work, and that's why I don't know. I just have so much, learning that I still have to do, and my husband still has to do. But she, when I asked Brooklyn about it, and she was like, I'm so sorry, I will never do it again. I love Mrs. J. I don't want her to be mad at me. And I'm like, she's not mad at you. She was like, she thought you were mad at her. And she's like, I could never be mad at her. And I'm like, got to apologize to her tomorrow when you see her. So long story short, like, she just, whenever she gets on a tangent, she fires you. And I got fired a couple times yesterday, so I know that. But it's the tone of voice when she does it. It's so funny. She's like the legit boss lady. That's why I call her Queen Bee. Queen Bee for Queen Brooklyn. She is the boss lady in this house, and she thinks she runs the world. But it's cute at the same time. But that's my story of the day.